and happy first Sunday of the season of Advent. I hope all of you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, although definitely a different way to celebrate this year for many. As I mentioned, today is the first Sunday of Advent. This is the season in which especially Christ followers use as a preparation and reflection time for the coming of the Messiah or the Christ child. This is one of the two major times of the year that are often full of reflection and new learnings. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, "The celebration of Advent is possible only to those who are troubled in soul, who know themselves to be poor and imperfect, and who look forward to something greater to come." Many of us that are Christ followers look at December 25th as the birthday of Jesus of Nazareth, a time of celebrating the birth of Christ. Although we do not know exactly when Jesus was born, I am hoping over the next few weeks that we will begin to push what we thought we knew about the season of Advent. We will be looking at prophets pointing us to the coming of the Emmanuel, and by the 20th of December, we're going to focus on piecing Matthew and Luke together and hearing the New Testament story leading into the birth of Jesus. We must remember that there are things we are so used to thinking when it comes to Christmas because of societal developments. And not everyone that celebrates Christmas does so because they are Christ followers. You will hear more in the coming weeks about how Christmas came to be for the Christian community. There are many that think that it was a kind of a cover story, and in some ways it appears that way. In other ways, we understand that Christmas became the official holiday of celebrating the birth of Jesus when Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity and made it okay for the entire empire. And that in turn made Christmas he chose to celebrate at that time because it was a way to move towards the conversion of Christianity and make it a little easier for others that were converting to understand, because they celebrated it around the same time that winter solstice was celebrated, which also had festivals and festivities. So it was an easier transition process. So in a lot of ways, that's one of the reasons why December is used to celebrate the birth of Christ. And again, more information like that is going to come out over the next few weeks. But today, we're going to look at one part of Isaiah. Isaiah spoke on God's behalf and the people of Judah. He spoke about judgment and informed the people that Israel's rebellion was going to come at a cost. Now, this was a combined message of hope. Isaiah points to the fulfillment of God's covenant promises to send a king from the line of David, which is also mentioned in 2 Samuel 7. Isaiah has to confront Ahaz, a descendant of David, and announces that his downfall is coming. He tells Ahaz that the empire of Syria, who is going to be the first to chop Israel down, but yet at the same time, when he's telling Ahaz that Syria is going to kind of come and try to take them out, he's also trying to give Ahaz some hope. And he tells Ahaz that he's sending them, that God is sending a new king. Today's scripture reading comes from Isaiah chapter 7, verses 10 through 17, and Isaiah 9, verses 2 through 7. It says, "Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, 'Ask the Lord your God for a sign, whether in the deepest depths or in the highest heights.' But Ahaz responded, 'I will not ask. I will not put the Lord to the test.' Then Isaiah said, 'Hear now, you house of David, is it not enough to try the patience of humans? Will you try the patience of my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel. He will be eating curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right. For before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of the two kings you dread will be laid to waste. The Lord will bring on you and on your people and on the house of your father a time unlike any since Ephraim broke away from Judah, he will bring the king of Assyria. And then from Isaiah 9, 2 through 7, it says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. Now, when I read this, the name Lord is in all capitals. And when we see this, especially in the Old Testament, that's more often when you'll see Lord written in all capitals. This is Yahweh or God's proper name. This is God's absolute name. So when Lord is in all capitals, it is specifically to God as Yahweh. It is Yahweh. So Yahweh is speaking through Isaiah to Ahaz, telling him to ask for a sign. Ahaz doesn't want any trouble and says no because he claims he doesn't want to tempt Yahweh. However, there are many scholars that ponder if the actual reason was that he didn't want to tempt God, which is a similar teaching that Jesus gives in the New Testament of not tempting God. Or if it actually comes down to asking for a sign, the sign being granted, and now Ahaz has to believe that God is actually doing things for his people and for him and is this powerful. You see, Ahaz was a rather weak and idolatrous king that had no belief, really, or trust in Yahweh. And by the time this particular set of events was happening, Judah had been through the ringer so many times. And even though Isaiah tries to warn him, Ahaz blamed Yahweh for allowing all of this to happen, even though Yahweh was speaking through the prophet to warn about the behavior and the rebellion of Ahaz and really of how he was choosing to run his people. Now, there are probably several among us that can think of a time when we may have been like Ahab, rejecting the gracious gifts of Yahweh because of our own selfish or silly reasons. And then Isaiah merely offers something to Ahaz to think about. Ahaz was known for treating people very poorly. And like some of the other rulers of Judah, Ahaz was also known for treating God or Yahweh even worse. We hear in Isaiah, "Hear now, you house of David. Is it not enough to try the patience of humans? Will you try the patience of my God also?" When a faithless ruler leads, he or she tires out their people, the very individuals that are going to be profoundly impacted by their decisions. Even today, we see that tyrants rule nation after nation in an oppressive manner, not understanding that their power is being used to destroy, not to help their people or to give their people hope. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel. This is the most famous prophecy regarding the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. As David Guzik states so well, it also illustrates a principle of prophecy, that prophecy may be both a near fulfillment and a far fulfillment. I am sure many have heard that Emmanuel translates to God with us. Emmanuel translates to is with us, and El translates to God. So Emmanuel, God is with us. The name is significant not only in its exact translation and meaning, but because it's another name in a very long lineage of names that have God embedded in them. And the fact that we are looking at the prophet Isaiah today, who is saying the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel, it's a very big deal because Isaiah translates to Yahweh is salvation. So this prophet is talking about the Son of God to be called Emmanuel, God is with us, and the prophet talking means Yahweh is salvation. One of Isaiah's sons is named Sher Yasub, which means a remnant shall escape or return. Again, a very long lineage of God embedded in names. Now, as we transition from reading from Isaiah 7 into the reading from Isaiah 9, there's some context we need to know and understand. We have just heard Isaiah counsel Ahaz to trust Yahweh. Now, at this time, there are two individuals that Ahaz feared the most, Rezin and Pekah. However, instead of listening to Isaiah, Ahaz chose to take things into his own hands. And he went to King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria and asked for his help in saving Jerusalem from Rezin and Pekah. He even went as far as taking gold and silver vessels from the temple to the king. Now, the king did just as Ahaz asked. The king defeated Israel and carried its people into captivity. But the price was that Jerusalem became a vassal of Assyria, a relationship that would later impoverish Jerusalem and would lead ultimately to its enslavement. But Yahweh hasn't given up on Jerusalem. In fact, there are better days ahead. As we look at the verses from Isaiah 9, right away we hear the people walking in darkness have seen a great light on those living in the land of deep darkness, and a light has dawned. This is a message of hope. During this time, the northern tribes were the first to suffer the invasion of Assyria. With God's mercy, these northern tribes will also be the first to see the light of the Messiah. This light would not be a small light, but a great light. I mean, imagine if you were so overcome by oppression and darkness that nothing felt bright enough to change your outlook, and then all of a sudden you saw a great light from the Messiah. The hope of the Messiah was all anyone had to hold on to at this point. The ministry of the Messiah was to bring joy and gladness to Israel. Just like Gideon had a great victory over Midian, the victory of the Messiah would be even bigger. The Messiah will not just break, but shatter the yoke of the oppressor. Now, to understand what that is, a yoke is a wooden device typically laid across the shoulders of a pair of oxen to allow them to pull a wagon of some type as a team. And a yoked pair of oxen could accomplish so much throughout an entire day. The Messiah was to come and break this yoke that binds us and will shatter the rod of the oppressor. So the yoke that is meant to bind us and oppress us, the Messiah was going to come and shatter this. The Messiah has complete victory over all of the enemies. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. This glorious prophecy of the birth of the Messiah reminds Israel that the victory bringing Messiah would be an actual human. The Messiah wouldn't be an angel or God without humanity. The Messiah would be God in human form, but not just human form, the form of an infant. I mean, God created Adam from the dust of the earth as a full-grown adult. He could have sent his son, the Messiah, to earth in the same form, but instead, Jesus was sent in the form of an infant so that he could fully identify with humanity and display in his life the servant nature that is in God. He came as an infant in a helpless and dependent form. The Messiah is the Prince of Peace. He is the one who makes peace, especially between Yahweh and mankind. The Messiah is mighty God, the God of all creation and glory, Yahweh who reigns in heaven, the one worthy of our worship and praise. The Messiah is our counselor, the one who is fit to guide our lives. The Messiah will rule on David's throne. The Messiah will continue to reshape and love his people. This is the hope that we have this season. That in all of the things going on in our world, the ways that history shows how it repeats itself time and time again, we don't just have an event in history and it never happened again. History has a way of coming full circle. We're seeing it again in the world we see today. Hatred, racism, judgment, belittling, degrading, separation. There is so much keeping people from coming together in unity and kindness and love in this world. The Messiah is our hope. The coming of the Messiah can destroy all of the oppressive nature that is around us. The coming of the Messiah, when Messiah enters our hearts, can bring us a newfound sense of peace, joy, and love. And he is the hope for humanity. That is what the time of Advent, one of many things we are to reflect on. What is it that you are hopeful for? Put some hope into that which gives you meaning and purpose. For those of us that are Christ followers, the coming of the Messiah is a huge part of our spirituality, not only just of our religion, but of our spirituality, that gives us meaning and purpose. For those of you that are not Christ followers, I push you today not to think the way I think, but I push you to think of what gives you meaning and purpose. And in that gives you meaning and purpose, what gives you hope? What is something you are hoping for that you can focus on in this time? I hope all of you have an amazing week ahead. I look forward to next week. And I know that in this time, it's hard for those of us that are Christ followers to not be in church. And I pray that although we cannot do what we typically do, that we can band together as a community to continue the work and the good message that God has blessed each one of us with. Have an excellent week ahead, everybody, and I will see you soon.